Hello, my name is Leah. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're gonna start outlining my new project, Project Game. So this is a middle grade sci-fi fantasy. I'm not really sure what to call it right now because I want it to be sort of Portal fantasy, but technically that Portal fantasy world is a MMORPG virtual reality world. I don't know. We're gonna work on the pitch. That's something I think will develop later on. But that's the gist of the premise. My next book is going to be a middle grade, which I'm very excited to be jumping into. It's new. It's different than anything I've ever written, which is super exciting. I'm thrilled to be working on something new and also really scared because I haven't worked on something new in a really long time. The last new project that I started was Project Shadows, and I started that in like 2019, and I started the current iteration of that, the current version of that in 2020. So it's been a while since I've started something new. I've spent the past week-ish sort of developing the idea. I've made my way through most of Story Genius, not fully, but I've been using that as my method to kind of develop this. And I've landed on enough plot nuggets that I think I'm ready to start outlining. There's still definitely a lot that I need to figure out, which is kind of part of the outlining process. I feel like for me, outlining and the tail end of brainstorming happen kind of simultaneously. I do still need to figure a lot of stuff out, but I'm also at the point where I really want to start plugging structure in. I really want to start crafting the arc and like seeing how things are going to play out. So we're going to do that. I have a few things in mind for how I want to go about this. Step number one is to finish going through Story Genius. I'm not going to fully finish it because by the end of the book, it's kind of having you actually start working on the book, and I really want to outline the whole thing before I start writing anything in it. The Story Genius method ends up in a semi like pantser style, which is just not how my brain works. But we're gonna make our way as far into Story Genius as we can. I'm going to create a mood board and some just general vibey things. This is something that I haven't done with previous projects until like after I've started writing them. Something that I really want to try with this one is part of Maggie Stiefvater's method, which I learned in taking her class, which is to always put mood first, and then you can kind of check everything, any choices that you're making against that to see if it's going to actually produce the story and the feeling that you want it to produce. So we're gonna make a little mood board just to kind of have some visual vibes because I'm a very visual person. I would like to start a playlist, but that's not gonna be like required because I suck at playlists, like horribly. I'm terrible at them. But then after that, we're gonna start actually diving into the story. I want to write a pitch/query, not obviously to actually query with, but a pitch that feels very buzzy in the style of a query, so I can kind of dial in on that tone, that mood, and you know, that hook. What's the hooky element that I need to really focus in on? Then we're gonna work on a synopsis where, you know, we're taking steps to expand the story with each step. A mistake I've made in the past is jumping straight from idea to outline because I end up just kind of filling in gaps with random stuff that doesn't actually have anything to do with the internal or external arcs. So we're gonna expand the summary into a synopsis. It's gonna have the main beats and it's gonna help me figure out where I want the story to go. And then after that, I want to bring it into Save the Cat and nail down what the Save the Cat beats are, because that kind of, whenever I'm drafting, I really like using Save the Cat because those beats kind of act as my flags in the distance, you know? Like as I'm writing, I can see what the next flag is and I can see what I need to do to get to that flag. I know some people, all they need is like the beginning and the end, and then they just write to that flag, but I need a lot more specific flags along the way to help guide me there. And then last but not least, we take all of that and bring it into an actual outline. Ideally every scene, but sometimes I know that just doesn't happen for me in a first outline. Sometimes what I need to do is start writing before I actually nail down what those missing pieces are. So I'm not gonna hold myself to a complete full outline, but I do want each chapter to have a specific purpose and a specific thing to happen in that chapter. So that is my plan to work on for the next 2 weeks, and my plan for this vlog is to take you along that process. It's difficult, you know, taking a nebulous, vague idea and turning it into an actual plot. This part is simultaneously a very exciting one for me and also part that I am not a huge fan of. I like working with solids. I like working with things that are set in stone, and so I think that's probably why I like revisions more than I like drafting. But we are going to be trying some new methods this time around, and I'm excited to see how my experience in revising Project Shadows will kind of help me in this pre-planning area where I know I'm a plotter, but I've never done enough in this section because I've always been too eager to get into the book. We're gonna do it this time. We're gonna set a good foundation. Let's get started. Okay, so I have finished my Story Genius work through. The basic way that method works out is you start by really examining your character's misbelief and where they got that misbelief in their history, their backstory sort of, and then Lisa Cron refuses to call it pre-writing, but you basically do some pre-writing, and then we move into sort of what are the things that have happened right as the book is starting to sort of start that beat of the story, start the rhythm of, okay, things are happening now, something's changing, or something's about to change. So I was able to figure that out. I was able to write out a scene card, aka sort of an outline for the first scene. The book wants you to write the first scene as well, but I didn't do that. And then after that, it wants you to skip ahead to the aha moment, is what the book calls it, which is essentially the moment that the character sort of realizes what they've been doing wrong. I struggled there for a while because I knew what my character needed to shift in their mindset, but I didn't know how that happened in like a physical external way. I didn't know what happened in the external story, like the actual plot, to sort of trigger that. And so I was struggling with that for a little bit, but I finally figured it out. And again, Story Genius wants you to like plot out the scene and then also write the scene, but I basically just did the scene card for it just to have that beat like in the outline. So we had that, but I was still kind of struggling with the external plot. I very much have figured out, especially with using Story Genius, I've very much figured out what the internal arc is going to be. I know what the emotional through-point line is for my main character, but I only had some like vague ideas and like placeholder things happening in the external arc plot until I watched Lizelle Sambury's recent video about the way that she creates her characters, and the method that she uses, like the questions that she asks herself in building like character profiles, are very similar to what Lisa Cron has you do in Story Genius, and she actually talks about Story Genius in that video and how her method is inspired by and draws from Story Genius a lot. And as I was watching her video and seeing like the questions that she asks herself, I was like, oh yeah, I have all of those already. I know the answers to those questions for my main character because I had just gone through Story Genius. But I decided to take her questions and put my character through that anyways, just to kind of see what happens, and at least just to have like everything about my character in one place. And there are 3 things that are a part of her method that I think took my character building, and at least in the terms of the pre-work for the character building, to another level that I was missing. And they were the application questions, which sort of gets talked about in Story Genius, but there's not like a specific step in that method that has you figure out exactly how this is affecting their real life on a relational level anyways. So in Lizelle Sambury's method, she asks herself, how does this misbelief affect their home life, basically, their work or school life, and their like friend or romantic relationships, essentially. And as I was going through that, the home life part, I kind of was like, well, I already know that I don't want this story to be parent-centric. I know, obviously, all of our trauma comes from our parents, but I really wanted to explore how this misbelief came from a more peer level type of thing and how it affects my main character and her peers, her friends at school. And so I didn't want the parents and their actions to play a huge part on all of this. But it got me thinking, and I realized that my character would absolutely be doing some very specific and drastic things at home because of their misbelief. And so I came up with this whole subplot because of asking myself, okay, how does this affect their home life? And it has nothing to do with her actually being at home. It has to do with her lying about something to her parents in order to look a certain way, which then gave me an opportunity to tie in another like side character that I've been really struggling with how to tie her in. She's like an ex-best friend character. I knew I wanted her in this story, but I couldn't figure out how to place her in it. But because she's lying to her parents, it gave me an excuse to pull in this best friend character from school and have her kind of be in on the lie, and there be this like, I don't know, give and take, like, you help me, I'll help you. I know we hate each other, but let's strike a deal here kind of situation. And I'm really excited about that, actually. Long story short, go check out Lizelle Samber's video. So that's where I am on the outlining process. I have that internal arc, and I have some ideas on how to make that external arc come together. Now what I need to do is sit down and like actually plug these things into like the Save the Cat beats just to get kind of like a skeleton going. I really like using Save the Cat for that, especially as an initial like foundation or launching point, and try to flesh out what happens in Act 2 a little bit more. Excuse the mess back here. We're supposed to be having people come replace like the whole, like the windows at my apartment. They're renovating some stuff, and so we were told to take everything off and away from the windows for that. However, they have not come yet, so this has just kind of been sitting for a few days, which is annoying, but hopefully we'll get that on the ball soon. And hopefully the new windows means that our apartment will be more energy efficient and that it won't make this room so freaking cold all the time, because this room is always very freaking cold, hence why I'm always wearing hoodies and sweaters in my vlogs. Anyways, I've finished my Save the Cat beats. It was super helpful to kind of get a big picture of everything and kind of see where I was missing some gaps. So I was able to, you know, do the main beats, and then obviously like the fun and games and bad guys close in Act 2 is kind of where it gets finicky in terms of the Save the Cat beats because of how big those sections are. Like those are huge chunks of Act 2, and because they're so big, it kind of doesn't give you very many like touch points to hit along the way. That's something that I've struggled with in the past, is figuring out how to keep the story like rhythmically moving on through those sections without getting stale or repetitive or the pacing being weird. So for my Save the Cat beats, what I did was I kind of noted what that section was fully about. So for fun and games, it's gonna fully be about, again, promise of the premise. Like, what is my premise? How can I, to my best ability, give the reader that? So we're gonna be super heavily into the VR world / the questing that goes on in this section, and things are gonna be going well for Mary, my main character. We've got her on an upward path, and then in Bad Guys Close In, we're gonna do the flip side of that. We're gonna start seeing how her actions in the VR world are affecting her real life, how things are going at school a little bit more. It's still gonna be pretty 50-50, I'd say, or if not more things happening in the video game than outside of it, just because that's what the book is supposed to be. It's supposed to be heavily in a different world. And basically what I did underneath that was I kind of bullet pointed the different subplots that I have and then how they are going before and after the midpoint. This was also a strategy taken from a Lizelle Samber video, so I will link that one down below as well. Moral of the story: simply take all of Lizelle Samber's advice. It's golden. I should just dedicate like this whole outlining video to her, basically. But I basically listed the subplots that I had, and there are I think 2 or 3 of them that are like going well for Mary in the first half, and then one that's going not well in the first half. And so in bringing that into the second half, you know, the opposite is supposed to be true. It showed me some things that I need to do with that lie that she tells her parents. Like, I need that to start falling apart. There is a point where I realized I needed to up the stakes and essentially not give her access to the VR world, the game. And in my brain I was like, Leah, you can't do that because she still needs to be in the game. Like, there's still 6 chapters left in this book. You can't just have her not be in the game. So I was able to come up with a workaround for that. Y'all, she's gonna get up to some shenanigans in the second half of Act 2. My girl's getting desperate, which I'm liking. I feel like my process up to this point has very much been just adding little tiny building blocks to the overall story. You know, I started with this nugget. I expanded on that a little bit. I added a little bit of plot into it. Oh, now I have this subplot. Oh, now I have this other subplot. And it's very much been piece by piece sort of building itself up. And by switching between these different methods of outlining and these different methods of, you know, thinking about story and laying things out, before I even touch the outline, doing all these different things has helped me like look at the story from all these different angles and sort of see where I needed to poke holes and see where I needed to do things. I think I mentioned that at the beginning of this, I wanted to write a query slash short summary of what happens, like in a pitchy, hooky kind of way. I gave up on that, not because I think it was too hard. I was just like, honestly, I don't think that this is gonna help me. I already had that like buzzy intro to the summary. I was just thinking way too hard on how to like summarize what happens when I still didn't even know what happens, you know? So I skipped the summary and I went straight to the synopsis. I think my synopsis is like a page and a half or something like that. It's not super long. Maybe it's just a page, but writing that out helped me kind of, you know, get a sense of the shape of the story, see a few more things I needed to add. I had a few more ideas while I was doing that. And then finally, last but not least, I sat down and I made my outline, or I'm in the process of making my outline. The first thing I did, I'm also reading Into the Woods right now by John York, I think is his name. But basically this is a book that's a study on 5-act structure and how that kind of, you know, plays out in story, slash how all stories really have the same shape. We just call that shape different things depending on who's writing the craft book. So what I did was, first of all, I listed out all my chapters. I landed on the number 16 chapters for some reason. I can't remember exactly why. I think it was because I was thinking in terms of word count. My goal ultimately for this book is to have it land around the 55k mark, maybe up to 60k. And so what I did was divide that by like 3,000 to 4,000 per chapter. And I just played with those numbers a little bit to get a chapter length that an average chapter length that I liked to get to that total word count number, which gave me 16 chapters. So in each chapter, I kind of plugged in what I knew, and then I divided them out into the 5 acts. So each act has 3 chapters in it, except for Act 5, which has 4 chapters in it, but that's because, you know, those ones are going to be a little bit shorter, a little bit snappier. And then I kind of, you know, from there was like, all right, what's the arc here? What's the arc here? What's the arc here? And was able to kind of build out my chapter outline. So now what I need to do is go back in and add scenes, because I'm still kind of foggy on the specifics of scenes. So I need to do my little actual scene outline, and then I'll have a summary for every scene in the book, and then I'll be done with my outline, and then I can start writing. So today is February 8th. I ideally want to have 4 chapters outlined today. And then, you know, 4 every day until Friday means I will have the full outline and I'll be ready to go.